Welcome to Addiction and the Family, Episode 64, Resilience and Hope After a Fentanyl Overdose. Welcome to Addiction in the Family. My name is Casey Arriaga. I am a licensed clinical social worker and addiction counselor at both Windmill Wellness Ranch and Recovery Tree Counseling. I'm the author of several books, including Realistic Hope, The Family Survival Guide for Facing Alcoholism and Other Addictions, and the children's trilogy based on my book, Mommy's Getting Sober. I've been in recovery from my own addiction since 1998, and I've married to someone in recovery. The first 10 years we were in active addiction together, and since then, we've been in recovery together. Join us as we share experience, strength, and realistic hope on how you and your family can learn to grow and recover together. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our inaugural video episode, which is this is the first episode that's going to come out as both video and audio. We have an amazing program for you today. So what we're looking at today, we have an interview that's a little unusual for us because we usually deal with issues that are straightforward around addiction. This one is not, and yet it overlapped so much that it seemed like a story that needed to be told. So in it, we have Jessica, the mother of JB, who is a young man who overdosed on fentanyl, apparently by accident. He was using other drugs. Fentanyl was laced in with them, and he had an extreme brain injury, the kind where they said, you just need to harvest his organs and let him go. And instead, Jessica fought back, fought for him, and just really saw the potential there in his recovery and hung in there with him. It is not an absolute miracle story where he got up and just like everything was fine. He's still going through a lot. She's still going through a lot. She cares for him every day. And yet I've heard not just fentanyl overdose, which of course applies for a lot of people, but also that story of resilience and hope. We also get to hear from the doctor who helped them through TIRR Memorial Hermann in Houston. And so she's also going to be with us to talk about kind of a little bit of her perspective on what happened medically, what are some of the things they've done to treat him, that sort of thing. And throughout the story in this interview, something else that I really heard in here that struck me was how much of overlap there was between people, for instance, who have this sort of brain injury and just get written off by society, and people who have addictions and they get written off by society. I heard the power of resilience and hope and community, how people came together to help each other, inspire each other, and those are things we hear about all the time around addiction and the family as well. So tune in. We got a great program for you. First, we're going to hear a quick word from one of our sponsors, and then we are going to get into that interview. Thank you so much. Addiction in the Family is brought to you in part by Windmill Wellness Ranch, where I happen to work. We are nestled in the beautiful hill country of Texas, and we've been rated as the #1 treatment center in the United States by the Track 9 independent rating system. And that's based on our ability to bring down addiction relapse rates, anxiety, depression, and also increase optimism, increase resilience, increase people's commitment to recovery. When you see the results, that's what counts. Now, we are so confident of our ability to help people that we offer the Windmill Guarantee. The Windmill Guarantee states that if somebody comes to treatment and does all the stuff that we suggest, and then also does all the follow-up that we suggest, and still needs to come back to treatment within 1 year, they can come back at no cost. If you want to find out more about the Windmill Guarantee and everything else that we have to offer, visit windmillwellnessranch.com or call our admissions line. While I've got your attention, we also offer a free family course to anybody. You don't have to have any association with Windmill, but if you wanted to get a taste of what we offer for families, sign up for a family course at windmillfamilycourse.com. You'll get weekly emails that'll point you towards podcast episodes, blog posts, videos, all kinds of resources that we offer for families. Because as you can imagine, I'm kind of passionate about family work, and I happen to run the family program at Windmill Wellness Ranch. So if you want to see more about that, go to windmillfamilycourse.com and spread the word. Again, anybody, anywhere who needs what we have to offer is free to sign up for the course and get those resources. Welcome back. All right, let's get into our interview. Welcome to the program. I'm going to ask you each just to take a moment, introduce yourself, and let us know what inspired you to be on this program today.
I'm Jessica Jarrett, and I'm the mom and full-time caregiver of my son, John Brian Jarrett. He's 29 years old, and he suffered an anoxic brain injury due to fentanyl poisoning. I felt inspired to come onto this podcast because I know how many families are impacted by fentanyl, whether it's with active abuse of fentanyl or other drugs being laced. There's a lot of media and campaign around one pill can kill and the devastation of that. That message needs to get out, but there's also other things that happen. And in my son's case, he lived, and we're grateful to God that he's alive, but he's changed forever. And therefore, our family has changed forever. I just wanted to share our story and the path, how we started and where we went along the way.
Thank
Far.
you so much for doing that. I understand how brave and vulnerable it is to step out and to talk about that story. So much difficulty around that potentially, and yet also so much joy and hope in it as well. So looking forward to exploring some of that as we go along. But I also want to invite our other guest, Dr. Ivanhoe. Do you mind talking a little bit about who you are and what brings you here today?
My name is Cindy Ivanhoe. I am a physiatrist, which is a specialist in physical medicine and rehabilitation with a board certification in brain injury medicine. I have a very long history of taking care of brain injury survivors and other neurorehabilitation patients in different sorts of levels of care. I'm here because there's a lot that is still possible for people who have anoxic, hypoxic brain injuries or brain injuries in general. But I'm also here because I love Jessica, and she is an amazing, strong woman. And I know I have from the outside looking in a sense of how much this has changed her life, not just her son's.
Thank you both for being here. And Dr. Ivanhoe, for our listeners, if you don't mind taking just a moment, you said anoxic, hypoxic. Would you mind breaking that down just a little bit?
So because of what happened to JB with fentanyl, he went through a period of not getting enough oxygen to his brain. And that's basically what it means. People don't realize that the brain controls everything ultimately, and how that goes on to affect life for my patients and for their care providers over time. So basically, that's what happened. He did not get enough oxygen to his brain.
Dr. Ivanhoe, I'll ask you to come from a medical perspective and help us get a better idea what that was. But first, I'd like to get that on the ground idea from Jessica. What was your experience with this?
Yeah, so I wasn't present. So some of the story is piecemealed from some that were present, some that have heard stories. At the time of this happened, JB was 24. This was in September of 2020. So we were in the middle of COVID. JB and I were living together, and he was working full time. He and I had dinner, and then he and his buddy were going to go fishing the next morning. They came to our house, got all the fishing equipment, went to his buddy's house, and at the last minute, they decided to go out and go to a house party. John Bryan definitely liked to have a good time. He had dabbled with drugs. He and I had a really close relationship, something that I was so grateful for, but also stressful when your kid's so honest. You're like, oh God, sometimes you don't want to know it all. And I had literally talked to him in the past, probably 6 months to a year, of just hearing stories about fentanyl, and did the thing you're supposed to do as a mom and talk to your kids about it, even though he was an adult, and said, I don't want you to be doing drugs at all, but if that's going to be your choice, just be so careful, John Bryan. And he almost laughed it off, like, Mom, I'm not an idiot. I know where the people I get things from or whatever. So he ended up going out. That party fizzled. He wanted to keep the party going. According to his phone, he had called a few people. It was getting later, didn't hear back from people. And I guess ended up reaching out to this person that had been in his past a little bit. And he ended up hanging out with this guy, totally John Bryan's choice. No one forced him to be there. The next morning, I just went to go and check his location, see where they were on the Colorado, and his phone was off. And that is just not JB. Like, always has his phone charged, always whatever. And I immediately just sank and was like, something happened or something's going on. But I really first thought he got arrested for something. And I just kept going on with my day. I was working on making lunches to bring out to the homeless in East Austin. And about 10 a.m., I got a message on Instagram from one of JB's friends, and it just said, call me, Jess, it's an emergency. He was like, JB's on the way to the hospital. What we ended up finding out is that he did some cocaine that was laced with fentanyl. One guy came by this apartment where he was basically passed out, not breathing and dying, and saw he was in distress and started CPR and called 911. This guy was a friend of JB's. His name's Natural, and he literally saved John Bryan's life. The paramedics came. Unfortunately, they didn't give them the whole truth on what was going on because I'm sure they were all scared. Whether or not they would have had Narcan or not on them, it wasn't even thought to be administered because they told him that JB had been in a car wreck and then showed up at their house with what they maybe thought was a head injury, which ended up not being true. We did have him tested for fentanyl when we found out that it was just drugs. And one of his friends had said that this guy who he ended up hanging out with, he knew that he had messed with fentanyl before. And according to JB's friends, he never had touched it and wouldn't have if it were there. Now, that's JB's story. I'll never know the full extent of that. So we don't know how long he was without oxygen. They did bring him back 3 times on the way to the hospital. Then he got to the hospital. He was in a coma. Then they ended up putting him in a medically induced coma. We didn't think he was going to make it through the night, to be honest. That was the perception that we were given from all the medical professionals involved. Then that ended up into a 10-day ICU stay and then moving to a long-term medical facility. And then eventually, almost 5 months after his accident, ending up at TIRR by the grace of God. It was the first time that anyone ever explained anything to us or gave us any kind of hope that there is a chance for recovery. And recovery doesn't mean he's all better, but where even small wins in a situation with an anoxic brain injury like John Brian has are huge for us as a family and for him.
Thank you so much for talking about that. And if I can ask, just on an emotional level, what was happening for you as all of this unfolded?
I was in the state of shock. Like, it just didn't feel real. John Brian's dad and I have been divorced since he was really little. So I'll refer to him in the past because his dad passed away last year. But when this happened, David and I met at the hospital and we came together and we embraced and basically didn't speak, but just held each other, praying that John Brian would live and that he would come out of this. We were being pretty bombarded very early on in the first couple of days with encouragement to take off life support or end life. And we were not prepared to do that when he hadn't even come out of the induced coma, and we didn't know what we were supposed to expect. Now, a lot of that was naivety for sure, because I did not know anything about anoxic brain injury. It's not the same as traumatic brain injury on how you recover. And there just isn't as much information. I do believe that most people that experience something like this end up taking their loved ones off of life support because they're given basically no hope. One thing that I have seen being in a community of other caregivers that care for specifically anoxic brain injured patients is that every single brain injury is completely different. How the healing happens, what the time down was or not, whether it's long or short, it seems to almost make no difference. And every brain is so individual, as we know. And I think every recovery is so individual. I know people who have recovered to walking, to talking, to going back to work. There have been what some would call miraculous recoveries from such a tragic type of brain injury. And John Brian has not come as far as we'd hoped he would at this point. It's been 4.5 years, but we haven't given up hope. And we'll continue to do the traditional therapies that we are able to do through insurance and Medicare. And then I continue to seek alternative therapies and opportunities for medical studies or trials. And John Brian's dad used to always say that he believed that it was going to be something like technology that ended up helping John Brian more than a medicine or a specific therapy. John Brian was a big risk taker, an adrenaline junkie. I just know that he would want us to do whatever we could and find any kind of way to help him.
And you faced really a lot of parents' nightmare and have found your way through that. And I want to circle back around and talk about that as we go along. But I want to take a couple minutes here and invite Dr. Ivanhoe. Can you fill in for our audience what was likely happening during that period?
There are a lot of pressures on families to make a rapid decision about withdrawal of life support. And Jessica said he was even still in an induced coma, so with even less information. And there are a host of reasons for that. Financial, how we measure outcomes in acute care, things along those lines, and biases. Sometimes I wonder if our bias here at TIRR is a little almost too hopeful. And I think we can let Jessica speak to that too. There used to be this body of literature that people who are able-bodied underestimate the value that people with disabilities still put on their lives. and that can play a role in the acute care setting. The other thing that I'm thinking about is how we talk about recovery. And I'll often tell residents that we talk about recovery and we're talking about, isn't it great somebody moved a finger, and the family is picturing that they're going to go back to work, driving a car, raising their children. There's a huge spectrum of what recovery looks like and what's important or valuable to the patient themselves and to their family. I think it's very hard for JB to tell us what is important to him. So sometimes we project or we assume based on who that person was before that injury occurred. If we were to take it organ system by organ system, whether it's in the acute setting or when they come to TIRR Memorial Hermann, to the Disorders of Consciousness program, every organ system, you name it, is affected from that brain injury. When you're in a medically induced coma, there are certain parameters that in the acute care setting are monitored, but don't necessarily tell us really what is going on in his brain.
I think that when he overdosed, whatever moment that was, that put him into cardiac arrest, which caused the lack of oxygen to his brain. And I know he had multi-organ failure.
Well, he also lost circulation to kidneys, to his liver, to his lungs. And so everybody is affected differently, but depending on how long they were without adequate oxygenation. I was wondering, as you're talking, Jessica, if you were asked, in spite of his organ failure, for organ donation.
100% every day. He was a donor on his license. He didn't have a will or a directive as to what he would want. But yes, every single day we were being talked to about organ donation and end of life. That was the main conversation. And being in a group of thousands of caregivers for a anoxic brain injury, everyone's story starts the exact same, that they've been pressured and pressured and pressured to withdraw life. And the patients in these have literally made miraculous recoveries, and their loved ones just sit there and go, what if I would have done this? Like, they have a life with some disabilities. I don't know anyone that's completely has no disability after going through something that dramatic, but there is still hope. When I was driving to the hospital on day 2, I was listening to the radio, this Christian station in Austin. This song came on called Thy Will Be Done. And it's just talking about giving things over to God and not being in control and knowing that you have no control. And at that moment, this like wave of peace went through my body. I said, God, your will be done. I cannot make this decision. I cannot possibly choose life or death for the person that means the most to me in the whole entire world. And from that moment on, and I think through our whole journey, that has been my sense of peace, of just knowing that it's not in my control and this is what happened. This is our life and we're going to do it our best, just as we would if anything would have happened. So as far as him having this be as a result to drug use, it breaks my heart. It's something that never had to happen. Am I angry at him, or do I judge him or feel shame about it? Absolutely not. We move on from that because nothing can change that as far as our day to day. But I know how important it is that people hear about his story and learn about it, because the fentanyl crisis is not going anywhere and it's just getting worse and worse. And I hear about people all the time that are dying or having incidents like John Bryan's and having their lives and everyone around them change forever.
Jessica, could I ask you to talk for a few minutes about that, about the changes in your life? This is a thing that comes up for a lot of family members that I work with, which is dealing with a certain amount of grief over here's what I thought life was going to look like versus what it looks like now. Do you mind talking about that and some of the things that
Yeah.
come up for you around that?
Yeah, I mean, I turned 55 this year. The year that this happened, I turned 50, and I'm not like ready to retire or anything like that. But John Bryan was a young adult and working and had a side business, had a wonderful girlfriend that he was serious with, and just looking forward to the future of him one day getting married, being a grandmother. He's my only child. And more than anything, my grief is for him. Like any parent would say. I would trade places with them, and that's the truth. So my heart breaks for the life and the adventures and just everything that he's lost for his future. But yes, I grieve it as well. He was born and raised in Austin, and I grew up here in Houston, but had been in Austin for almost 30 years. And I chose to move us here, continue his care with TIRR and the amazing therapist and Dr. Ivanhoe, also to be around my family, because even though my friends are next level supportive and so amazing, you can't depend on that forever, and you need help. You need outside support, and not everyone gets it. I'm grateful every single day for the friends and family in my life and in John Bryan's life that continue to support us. He just had a buddy coming through from New Orleans to Austin and stopped by on Sunday night so he could tell JB all the stories about his Mardi Gras trip. And JB's friends have showed up, and it's huge. You can tell his spirits are lifted. He listens to every word they say. He hangs on to everything, and it lifts my spirits too, to have that encouragement and support and knowing that people still really care. I luckily had a business that I could work from home, and so I continued to work, but I literally never sleep because I'm his primary caregiver, and I do it by myself 24 hours a day. I have a bed in the closet in the room that he lives in, so I can be right there. I never imagined my life would be this way. I haven't been away from him for more than 8 hours in 4.5 years. If John Bryan would have been born with some kind of disease or disability that we had no control over, what would I have done? Just jumped in and cared for him every way possible. And that's where my heart is. It's hard, but it doesn't feel like a personal burden.
I had a conversation today with one of my patients about how it's not necessarily the tragedies that befall us in life, it's how we choose to live with them. And I think one of the things that's so impressive about Jessica, I'm going to cry. One of the things that's so impressive about Jessica is her acceptance of where she is and where JB is and how she copes. The patients and families who deal the best are the people who just kind of put one foot in front of the other. And here's where I am, and I'm not changing it. You heard her say that. She's appreciative of the support she gets. I will tell you that for somebody whose injuries are as severe as JB's, it is rare that friends still show up 5 years later. People may have the best of intentions, but they will drift back to their lives. And I don't doubt that it's a credit to who JB is and was, and to Jessica, that people are still showing up for them.
Yeah, definitely to who JB was. It wasn't until after his accident that people came forward to share with me that he had saved their life from addiction. A couple of them that he had personally reached out to their parents saying, I am worried for them. I am scared. Several of them that he walked through the door of rehab, got on a plane and got them there. His heart was so big for the people around him and for his family. I do believe because he showed up for a lot of people for the 25 years that he was able to. I know in the beginning, especially when he first got to TIRR, it was COVID, and there was like a surge at that time. I couldn't go in for the first 3 or 4 weeks. I would have to get on Zoom to see what was going on and meet with the therapist, and he was there all by himself. We had been, in hospitals for 4.5 months where he had been laying in a bed, had no therapy, lifeless almost. And the first day at TIRR, they FaceTime me from the courtyard. He was in a wheelchair in basketball shorts and a t-shirt and Adidas tennis shoes. And I mean, I just broke down into tears. I was like, oh my gosh, like everyone until that moment had made it seem like he will never do anything, And when I saw him that first morning at TIRR in full clothes and tennis shoes and out in the courtyard with the sun shining on his face, I was like, we've got this. Like, this is going to be hard and this is going to suck, but we can do this. We have family events all the time at my brother's houses or friends, and we still celebrate all of our birthdays at our favorite Mexican restaurant out here in Houston, Lopez Mexican restaurant. And JB and I show up and he's there. My brother was telling me, I think that JB has hope, but you have created hope for him by the way that you embody life and like take everything each day. Without that, he wouldn't be able to have hope, and I guess that's what I do. I don't really do it on purpose, but that's just how I feel. I still feel hopeful, that there is still more chance, even small or big, of continued recovery in John Bryan's life.
Okay, that seems like a great place to take a break and hear from one of our sponsors. And then when we come back, we'll have the rest of our interview. Among our sponsors, the most important one is you. We're just so grateful for your support on our mission of helping families find recovery. Here's some ways you can help. If you know anyone who could benefit from our message, encourage them to listen and subscribe. Hit that like button. We are so grateful for all of our subscribers on Patreon. So if you are able to support us in that way, we are so incredibly grateful for you. You can also check out any of my books. We've got Realistic Hope, the Family Survival Guide for Facing Alcoholism and Other Addictions. We have the trilogy based around my book, Mommy's Getting Sober. Those are children's books, which are great to spread that message. And each one of the books also includes a guide on how to talk to kids about addiction. And also have my book, Spirituality for People Who Hate Spirituality. Please tell a friend, spread the word on social media. Let us know what we can do to help. Feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate each and every one of you. We could not do this without you. Welcome back. All right, let's have the rest of that interview with Jessica and Dr. Ivanhoe. Well, I hear that amazing sense of hope that you bring, and compared to the original forecast you were given, some of that hope has been fulfilled. Let's take just a couple minutes and talk about that, about the difference between what you were told and what has happened so far.
We were told that he would be in a vegetative state, that he was brain dead, and that I would not be able to care for him. He would need to be transported to a nursing home where he would just basically be looked after until he died. They didn't even really expect him to live through his ICU stay. So they gave no hope. I think it was day 9. I was talking to him and they had taken him out of the induced coma, but he was still very sedated. I was talking to him and I just pulled my phone out of my back pocket and started recording. I have no idea why. And I just started saying, JB, you got to open your eyes and let me know that you can hear me. And as I'm talking, you start to see his eyes fluttering. And it literally almost looks like there are tiny dumbbells on his eyes. And he's using every bit of power, every bit of strength he can muster. And his eyes slowly start opening and he just stares at me. And I scream. I can't believe I've got it on video. I literally dropped my camera. I didn't get anything after that. But I went and told the doctor, and he didn't really seem to care too much. I spoke with the neurologist who was highly encouraging us to end life support. I asked him if I could show him that video, and he said that he didn't care to see it. And by the grace of God, he left town, and another neurologist took over his shift the next day. And I showed her the video, and she said, "Oh, he's not quite done." She said, "I don't want to give you any hope. I'm not telling you what this means, but this means something, And when he was transferred to the LTAC, the long-term care facility, he had a doctor that would come by and do his rounds, and he would pick up JB's hand and say, "Squeeze my hand, squeeze my hand, squeeze my hand," about 3 times, and drop JB's hand and walk out, basically saying he's not responding. And that was his notes every single day. I had talked to one of my brothers who actually had an AVM, ulterior venous malformation, that burst in his brain when he was in his 20s. And so I would send videos to my family, and he would say, "Jessica, you have to talk slower to him." When I had my brain injury, and it was nothing like JB's, it would take me forever to process anything. So that just really helped me, but it also made me think, like, the doctors that are seeing him aren't even giving him time, But I knew that he was there and that he could understand me when he had been crying and crying, and it was different than anything. I knew he was in pain, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with the pain. So I decided to try something, and I said, "JB, can you stick your tongue out?" And he stuck his tongue out at me. I'm like, "Okay, I'm just going to say that was a coincidence, And I did it like 4 or 5 times. So I started talking to him and saying, "What hurts? Is it your head? When I get to the body part, I want you to stick your tongue out." So I'm going over his whole body, just inch by inch. And I get to his hip, and he sticks his tongue out so hard and doesn't bring it back in his mouth. And he just sits there. And I'm like, his hip, that's so weird. So I tell the doctors, of course, they don't really believe me that John Bryan can communicate with me. And a couple of days later, he ends up having fever. They can't figure out what it is. They did blood work. They can't figure out that there's an infection. They decide to take him to do a full body scan, and he has a dislocated hip. And I'm completely blown away. And instead of trying to do something about it, they discharged him and sent him back to St. David's Hospital. So I called the Brain Injury Association of Texas, and it was like between Christmas and New Year's. So they weren't answering. And I left a message, and a woman called me back from home and said, "Look, we're closed, for the holidays, but you sounded so upset and so desperate for help. There's a physiatrist with the same type of doctor that Dr. Ivanhoe is. His name is Dr. Urquidez. And I think that he might be able to help you, at least give you some guidance." He called me on my cell phone and he said, "I've got my son's birthday party today, but I'll meet you at the hospital tomorrow." He came, he had done his fellowship at TIRR, and he brought in another woman who was the head of rehabilitation at St. David's. We had never seen this person or heard that we could talk to the head of rehabilitation. No one thought John Bryan had the ability to rehabilitate. But they brought this woman in, Bonnie Wong, who had also done her fellowship at TIRR. And she met with JB. She saw me asking him questions and him sticking his tongue out in response for yeses and nos. And she said, "I'm writing a letter today." And 3 days later, he was on his way to TIRR. Most people don't understand that you don't have to be responding or actively participating in therapy to be able to start rehabilitation at TIRR, where most brain injury rehabs, you have to be able to actively participate in some level. And so most people, when they have a loved one like John Bryan, there really isn't hope, because not everyone can get into TIRR. And there are several other rehabilitations in the country that are like TIRR. No one's like TIRR, but are in that caliber. But it's just hard to get there. I mean, I was lucky that I lived in Texas. Do I believe that miracles happen and that God could heal him? Yes, but that's like a separate thing from what I know medically, how he can recover. And I don't live in la la land about that, but I'm not going to quit trying to figure out what else can we do to help him.
Well, I love that. And again, just your resilient spirit around all of this and your loving spirit around all of this really shines through. Dr. Ivanhoe, can you jump in and talk just a little bit about what is the actual work that you've done from your end with John Bryan or with a case like this that leads to outcomes that are so much better than what was expected or projected?
So I was consulted acutely when he was an inpatient upstairs on the service of one of my colleagues about his intrathecal baclofen pump, which is one of the treatments that we utilize to help people move better and also to get people off bad drugs, is what I call it. And I don't mean fentanyl. I mean drugs that keep you sedated, drugs that make it harder for our patients to engage with us, to show those other physicians who aren't believers that, yeah, they're in there, to what variable degrees. And it's difficult in that we are terrible at predicting how patients are going to do, if they're going to do well, whatever that means to whomever, or if they're going to have more or less disability. And there's an expectation that isn't realistic that people are going to have a nice linear recovery. At 2 weeks, you'll do this, and at 3 weeks, you'll do that. And it doesn't work that way, which is really unfortunate because so many times people get sent to facilities that don't know how to handle their situation, and they aren't going to get the right equipment to be able to go home. And a lot of patients who look like JB end up in nursing homes with horrible complications.
I just have so much confidence in Dr. Ivanhoe for her brain, but also for her heart and also for her bluntness. It's the best because there's no sugarcoating, and she's got the biggest heart. There are all these alternative therapies that are out there that aren't under insurance, but I'll always tell her what I'm doing or what I might do or what I want to do, because I want her to tell me absolutely no if it's something I shouldn't do or he shouldn't, be put through, but also just to make her aware, because I'll probably do it anyways. No, just kidding.
Most of the time, we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And if I were in Jessica's position, I would want to try everything that's out there. And maybe her experience will lead to somebody else having a beneficial experience. And so if I don't think it's going to hurt someone, I'm not that physician who's going to say to you, "Oh, that's ridiculous," or "Don't try it." We don't know. People will get hung up, insurance companies will get hung up on what's FDA approved and what isn't. And it takes years for something to even have somebody decide to study it to look for that FDA approval. So if Jessica's come up with something that could potentially be beneficial, you might have more to gain than you will to lose.
So the very last thing, I'm going to ask you each 30-second elevator pitch. What do you want to say to families out there that might be listening to this program today?
I'd like people to know that there is hope. It's not always pie in the sky. TIRR has a program that offers people options that they don't really know are there, but not everyone's going to be able to access programs like our programming here or the handful of other programs that offer it. It doesn't end with us. I think that's really important. When you get discharged from inpatient rehabilitation, it doesn't have to stop there. Recovery, improvement, changes are going to happen indefinitely, just like we're all still evolving. So are our patients who have had these brain injuries. And I think that's really important for people to keep in mind. And they won't always like where they end up either. Not everyone is Jessica's spirit.
Thank you so much. And Jessica, in 30 seconds or less, what would you want to say to families out there?
More than holding on to hope is actually embracing it and living in the moment. I do not know if John Brian will outlive me or die tomorrow, just like all of us. We are just going to live each day, day by day. We're going to live in the moment. We're going to do everything we can to have the most positive life and to make things the best for him. It's hard, but living in the moment and creating hope for your loved one and for yourself.
I think it's also important for people to realize disability is not contagious. Most people don't have to think about what it's like to live in this city, state, country with a disability. But 1 in 4 of us will have one, or more will have somebody in their family. No matter what people look like, they're still human beings and they still deserve respect, love, consideration. And a lot of times people have a hard time giving it because of their own discomfort with what they're seeing. But, you know, we can all still grow.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful thought to end this show with. And it's the sort of thing that comes up a lot around families with addiction, which is a lot of what I work with, which is people assume like, oh man, must be the family's fault or the person's fault. And it's a disease, it's a brain condition that nobody chooses. And being able to have that message of not just resilience and hope, but compassion is one of the central messages that we try and carry in all of our work. So thank you both so much for being here. And
thank you, Casey. It was such a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for taking the time for us to share the story.
Thank you.
Good care.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Addiction and the Family. This program is recorded, produced, written, floor swept, the whole bit by myself and my wife, Kira. Just so happy to have you with us. If you'd like, you can always look us up on Facebook. We are tweeting on Twitter, whatever they're calling it these days. And we can be found on Instagram. We can be found on Blue Sky. We can be found on Pinterest. So visit caseyauthor.com and just know that we are so appreciative of you and your support. Hit that like and subscribe. Let us know what you think. Feel free to email us anytime at addictionandthefamily@gmail.com. Take care till next time.